Mercedes may have just been hit with the most devastating FIA decision of the entire Formula One season. Because after weeks of panic inside the paddock, the FIA has now reportedly confirmed that the controversial Mercedes engine behavior linked to Antonelli's terrifying dominance is considered completely illegal. And the fallout could destroy the championship fight overnight. Ferrari pushed for action. Honda demanded answers. Audi reportedly warned the FIA that Mercedes had gone too far. And now Formula One is waiting for one brutal moment. How much performance is Mercedes about to lose? Because according to multiple technical reports, rival teams believe the Mercedes engine may have been worth nearly 4/10 per lap once fully heated during races. 4/10. That is catastrophic in modern Formula One. That is the difference between fighting for podiums and humiliating the entire grid. And the reason this story exploded is almost unbelievable. Mercedes allegedly discovered a hidden loophole buried deep inside the regulations. The FIA only measured engine compression while cold. So rival engineers now believe Mercedes designed components that physically transformed once the engine reached racing temperatures. Tiny thermal expansion. Microscopic deformation. A hidden combustion effect that allegedly turned a legal engine in the garage into something completely different once Antonelli hit full speed on track. And now the FIA has acted aggressively. New hot condition inspections. New verification procedures. New scrutiny directly targeting the Mercedes power unit. That changes everything. Because if Mercedes suddenly loses pace after the FIA crackdown, Formula One may have just uncovered the biggest technical controversy of the modern era. But if Antonelli stays dominant anyway, then the rest of the grid may be facing something even more terrifying than an illegal loophole. A Mercedes car that was genuinely faster from the very beginning. If you love Formula One stories that expose what is really happening behind the garages, subscribe to the channel. At the beginning, Mercedes thought they had found the perfect Formula One loophole. Not an illegal engine. Something far more dangerous. An engine that technically passed FIA inspections, while allegedly behaving completely differently once Antonelli reached full racing speed on track. And honestly, that is why the entire paddock started panicking. Because rival teams quickly realized this was not a normal innovation. This was engineering at the microscopic level. The FIA checked the Mercedes power unit multiple times during the opening phase of the season. Every inspection reportedly came back legal. That should have ended the story. Instead, it made Ferrari, Honda, and Audi even more suspicious. Because the Mercedes performance simply did not make sense anymore. Especially once races progressed. Especially once engine temperatures increased. And this is where engineers inside the paddock started focusing on one tiny detail hidden inside the regulations. The compression ratio was only measured while the engine was cold. That sounds harmless. It was not harmless at all. Because Formula One engines physically change shape under extreme heat. Metal expands. Pressure rises. Components move microscopically during racing conditions. Normally, teams try to reduce those changes because instability inside the engine creates reliability risks. Mercedes allegedly engineered the entire concept around exploiting those thermal changes instead. And suddenly, rival teams believed the FIA might have been inspecting one version of the engine, while Antonelli raced with another version entirely once temperatures climbed. That is the core accusation exploding across Formula One right now. One report suggested Mercedes created a special connecting rod alloy designed to expand slightly under racing temperatures. Tiny movement. Almost invisible. But enough to push the piston slightly higher inside the cylinder once the engine became fully heated. Another theory claimed the cylinder head itself subtly deformed inward during races. Again, microscopic movement. Fractions of a millimeter. But Formula One championships are often decided by microscopic margins. And then came the allegation that terrified rival manufacturers most. The hidden secondary combustion chamber. According to reports, Mercedes may have designed a tiny additional cavity inside the engine that helped the power unit remain legal during FIA inspections, before effectively sealing itself off once the engine reached full operating temperatures. If true, the implications are enormous. Because rival engineers believe Mercedes may have effectively created two engines in one. One for inspection. Another for racing conditions. And according to technical estimates inside the paddock, the total gain may have reached nearly 4/10 per lap. That number terrified the entire grid immediately. 4/10 changes everything in Formula One. Qualifying strategy. Tire management. Overtaking opportunities. Driver confidence. And this is where Antonelli suddenly became the center of the biggest controversy of the season. Not because people doubted his talent. Actually, the opposite. The rookie looked so naturally comfortable inside the W17 that rival teams started questioning whether the engine itself was helping stabilize the car under acceleration. Smoother power delivery, better traction, more confidence exiting corners. That possibility changed the emotional tone of the entire controversy. Because this was no longer only about horsepower. It became about drivability. And drivability wins championships. That is why the FIA intervention became inevitable after Miami. Because even after Mercedes lost one earlier power deployment system, Antonelli still looked terrifyingly fast. And that is the moment Ferrari, Honda, and Audi reportedly pushed the FIA much harder behind closed doors. After Miami, the pressure inside Formula One reportedly became almost unbearable for the FIA. Because by that point, rival teams were no longer quietly complaining behind closed doors. They were revolting. Ferrari believed Mercedes had pushed the regulations beyond their intended limits. Honda reportedly feared the loophole was already distorting the championship fight itself. Audi wanted immediate intervention before other manufacturers started copying the same concept. And honestly, the FIA suddenly found itself trapped in a dangerous position. Because technically, Mercedes had not originally failed inspection. That is the detail making this story so controversial. The engine passed the official checks. The regulations only controlled compression measurements while cold. Mercedes allegedly realized they could exploit the gap between inspection conditions and actual racing conditions. And for a while, the FIA appeared unable to stop it. But after Miami, everything changed. Because even with one earlier Mercedes power deployment system already removed, Antonelli still looked frighteningly fast. That terrified rival teams immediately. Most engineers expected Mercedes to slow down once the earlier system disappeared. Instead, the car still accelerated differently compared to the rest of the grid. Too smooth, too stable, too aggressive once temperatures fully built inside the power unit. And this is where the controversy became much bigger than simple horsepower. Rival engineers reportedly started believing the alleged thermal engine behavior was helping the entire car become easier to drive at the limit. That matters enormously in Formula One. Because a car with stable power delivery allows drivers to attack corners much earlier without fear of rear instability. Earlier throttle application means better exits. Better exits mean better straight-line speed. Everything connects together. And Antonelli looked unbelievably confident inside the W17 from the opening races. That is what made rival teams so uncomfortable. The rookie was not driving like somebody fighting an unpredictable Formula One car. He looked completely connected to it. Calm, precise, fearless under acceleration. Which created a very uncomfortable question across the paddock. How much of that confidence came from Antonelli himself? And how much came from the engine behavior underneath him? That question became impossible to ignore after Miami. Because telemetry comparisons reportedly showed the Mercedes still behaving unusually once engine temperatures stabilized deep into race conditions. And suddenly, the FIA had no choice but to react aggressively. Reports indicate new hot condition verification procedures were introduced specifically targeting the exact area rival teams believed Mercedes had exploited. That changes everything psychologically. Because now the next races become a public experiment. If Mercedes suddenly loses several tenths, the entire paddock will immediately connect the dots. Every earlier Antonelli pole position will get questioned again. Every dominant qualifying lap will become part of the controversy. And honestly, the emotional pressure on the rookie now becomes enormous. Because every session after the FIA intervention carries an invisible test attached to it. If Antonelli stays dominant, he proves his talent is real beyond the controversy. But if performance drops sharply, the criticism inside Formula One could become brutal overnight. And here is the detail still making Ferrari, Honda, and Audi nervous even after the FIA crackdown. Some reports after Miami suggested Mercedes retained genuine advantages in chassis balance, drivability, and energy management underneath all the controversy. That possibility may be the most frightening outcome of all. Because loopholes can be banned. A genuinely superior car is much harder to stop. And if Mercedes stays fast after the FIA intervention, then Formula One may be forced to confront a brutal reality. The team everybody accused of exploiting the rules may have also built the best car on the grid legally from the very beginning. And now Formula One is approaching the moment where the entire Mercedes project could either survive the storm or completely collapse under the weight of the investigation. Because once the FIA fully enforces the new hot condition checks, there will be nowhere left to hide. No more uncertainty. No more theories. Only lap time. And that is exactly why the atmosphere inside the paddock reportedly feels explosive right now. Because Formula One teams understand something casual fans often forget. You can hide technical explanations. You cannot hide performance loss. If Mercedes suddenly drops 2 or 3 tenths after the FIA crackdown, the entire grid will immediately treat that as confirmation that the controversial thermal engine behavior was real. And honestly, Mercedes knows that too. That is why the pressure now feels completely different compared to earlier in the season. Before, the controversy was mostly technical. Now it is personal, political, because reputations are suddenly at stake. Antonelli's reputation, Mercedes' engineering legacy, the credibility of the FIA itself. Everything is now connected to what happens after the intervention fully takes effect. And this is where George Russell quietly becomes one of the most important figures inside the entire story. Because Russell gives Formula One something incredibly valuable: comparison. He already understands exactly how the W17 behaved before the FIA changes. The balance, the throttle response, the rear stability under acceleration. If the engine behavior changes after the crackdown, Russell will feel it immediately. And some people inside the paddock reportedly believe that could completely reshape the internal dynamic at Mercedes. Because until now, Antonelli's rise looked unstoppable. Pole positions, huge qualifying performances, massive media attention. At moments, it felt like the future of Mercedes had already shifted entirely toward the rookie. But Formula One changes brutally fast when technical controversy enters the conversation. Especially when the FIA officially intervenes. Because now every Antonelli performance becomes evidence. Every strong qualifying session strengthens his reputation. Every weaker session fuels the criticism. That psychological pressure destroys many young drivers in Formula One. But here is where the story becomes deeply uncomfortable for the rest of the grid too. Some rival engineers reportedly still believe Mercedes remains the strongest overall package even after losing the controversial engine behavior. That possibility terrifies Ferrari, Honda, and Audi more than the loophole itself. Because loopholes can be banned. A genuinely superior car is much harder to stop. And the W17 reportedly still has strengths that go far beyond straight-line speed. The way it manages tire temperatures. The smooth energy deployment. The drivability under traction zones. Those qualities do not disappear overnight just because the FIA changes inspection procedures. And that creates one terrifying possibility for the rest of Formula One. What if the FIA intervention only removes part of the advantage? What if Mercedes loses the hidden thermal gains, and still remains comfortably ahead anyway? Because if that happens, the emotional balance across the grid changes instantly. The accusations lose power. The outrage weakens. And suddenly, rival teams are forced to confront a brutal reality they were desperately hoping was not true. Mercedes did not dominate only because of the loophole. They dominated because they were genuinely better prepared for the 2026 regulations from the very beginning. And honestly, that may become the most painful outcome of this entire controversy. Because Formula One teams can accept losing to a hidden trick eventually. What they struggle to accept is losing to a team that simply understood the future of the sport before everyone else did.